Hello and welcome to Best Practices for Delivering a Course Online. My name is Tracy Miller and I'm the Online Teaching Coordinator here at Northern Illinois University in the Faculty Development and Instructional Design Center. Here are some of the things that I hope we will be able to accomplish and some things that you will be able to do upon completion of this workshop. I'm hoping you'll discover some practical strategies on how to communicate with your students, how to grade student work online, and then how to support your online students. So hopefully everyone has a similar interest, and that is why they're here to hear more about all of that. So when we talk about a quality online course, we think about online teaching and learning through this idea of a quality pie. And so there's a lot of different components that make up a quality online course. And you can see that here there's a variety of things that might go into that. Anywhere from the design of the course, the particular institutional infrastructure you have at the university. The LMS is Blackboard here at Northern. That's our learning management system. And then also the faculty's readiness and the students' readiness. Today we're going to really focus on the course delivery, or what I like to call the actual teaching of the course. And so we're going to kind of shy away from some of these other areas and again really focus on those best practices for delivering an online course. So basically it's not so different teaching an online course than it is teaching a face-to-face course. You're still going to want to do these things that we've already talked about. Communicate with your students, grade or assess your students, and of course to support their learning. So what is so different about teaching online? I think the big difference is maybe how you approach all of these aspects of the course. You're going to be communicating with them differently. You're going to be using tools to grade their work, and the technology is going to be meant to support the students' learning and not be a hindrance for your students. So let's start off with just a little bit more about the overall best practices in delivering an online course. And I think a good way to start is to sort of get to know each other. And as you get to know each other in an online course, especially when you're separated by time and distance, it's really important to tap into the student's motivation. So the first one I'd like to talk about is the students' self-interest. Students are, as we all are, very interested in our own lives and our own things are going on in our lives. And so any way that a faculty member can connect the material to the student's interest and be interested in them will really help their motivation in really engaging in the course content and engaging with you, the instructor, in the course. So one of the ways you can do that is to allow your students to share something personal about themselves, maybe a hobby or an interest that they have. Also, you might want to share something that is personal but not intimate about you. So again, a hobby, something recent that happened in your life, any way that you might be able to find a connection with them, again, to kind of help that motivation. For instance, I actually adopted a dog this weekend, and so if I shared that with you or with my students, and they were dog lovers or maybe they're even a cat lover and they kind of want to battle it out with me. That is starting those connections and helping the students also realize that the faculty members are human beings that they can connect with. The next thing that's very motivating for students is their academic life. So, they're in higher ed, learning more, they want to enrich their academic life. And so there's a couple ways that the faculty can take the lead on really tapping into the students' academic life motivation. And one is to really articulate what your expectations are to your students so that they can meet those expectations and be very clear about what you're looking for. But it also helps them understand the relevance of the assignment, maybe even a certain section of the course, or honestly, maybe even the course itself. If this is a course that maybe is not part of their program, they're taking it as an elective, or maybe they just don't seem to understand why it's in their program, letting students know what you expect and why it is relevant to their academic life is really going to help their motivation. Also, they are able to identify and reward what you value. You're going to reward them for things that you value, basically. So if you're letting them know that you're looking for a professional level of writing, for instance, and a student's able to recognize that and then accomplish that, then let them know that that's something you appreciate and reward them either with a grade or praise or something like that. And then the final motivation is the student's professional life, their future professional life, perhaps. Let them know how this might be relevant in their future. In some cases, online learners, because they're that working professional that's trying to fit in a college degree, it may be something that is even part of their current professional life. So a couple ways that you can help that motivation is to really show passion and enthusiasm for your unique discipline. Um, and that can be more difficult when you're not meeting them face to face. You have to figure out ways to show that passion and enthusiasm. And that might be having more presence in the course. We're going to go over a couple ideas on how you could really show that enthusiasm, but definitely you want to go beyond that kind of stale content. Connect any common skills that they may be acquiring through this course. So are they going to become maybe a better professional academic writer? Are they going to learn better time management skills? Are they going to learn how to use a spreadsheet more efficiently? Anything that might kind of go across the spectrum. Try to connect what they're doing in the course to some common skills that might be valuable in their professional life. And then, of course, acknowledge their professional life. So if they are juggling homework, school, kind of let them know that you understand some of these priorities. So one of the ways that you can kind of get to know your students a little bit better and communicate almost a message with them is to use the Blackboard student profiles. And you may not be aware of these, but these are actually on Northern's instance of Blackboard. And you can find it by clicking on the link at the top of the page next to your picture, or it may be just a silhouette if you haven't set up a profile yet. And encourage your students to start using these profiles. You can see they can add a picture of themselves. They can add what their major is, where they are in the program, any other sort of clubs that they're involved with. It's all this idea of getting to know a little bit more about your students. I find this incredibly helpful because when you add these profile pictures, the profile picture shows up in the discussion boards. So if you're using discussion forums, instead of seeing that, that silhouette, you'll be able to see a picture of the student, or maybe even something else that the student has chosen to become their profile picture. And you know what? That's okay too. If I want to put a picture of my dog as my profile picture, again, I sort of know that maybe I'm going to be a little camera shy, but I am going to let my students know that I'm a dog lover. So check out that student profile area, create one for yourself. A great way to kind of connect with the students a little bit more. You want, in an online course, you want to communicate frequently. You want to make sure that you're addressing them several times a week. Especially depending on the length of the course, you may need to speed that up if your courses may be accelerated a little bit to maybe an 8-week schedule. You also can communicate using announcements, is actually what I have up here on the top. It's a reminder that something is due, especially early in an online course, as the students are establishing that routine. Send them out a couple of reminders. I like a weekly greeting, followed by next, I let the students know when any grading is done from the previous week. And then again, if there's any big projects come up and you need to send out a reminder, a great way to communicate with your students. Now here in May, if you haven't noticed, over May, everybody noticed because the interface looks so different. You'll see that Blackboard has some new features, and one is that you can send out a reminder from the Grade Center to students that have not completed an assignment. So maybe you're going to do that for students that you know something's going to be due in the next 24 hours, that a lot of assignments have already come in, but you just want to send out that last reminder. This new feature is kind of cool to me. I think it'll be valuable to many people. And you can see this screenshot here is just a snippet of the Grade Center, and at the top of the column is a planet paper. And then there's that action button or that drop-down menu that you can click next to it. The column and rows below it, you can see there's some needs grading area, but there's a couple students that have not submitted anything yet. So you can just use that send reminder, and that can just give your students maybe just that little bit of push to get that assignment in on time, perhaps even early. Another important communication sort of best practice or rule in an online course is to come up with what your communication expectations are. And it's almost your communication expectations for yourself, but you're letting the students know so that they're not maybe sending you multiple emails when you haven't responded within the first hour, or sending you, discussion questions at 2 o'clock in the morning and wondering why you're not replying. Any sort of communication expectations that you have, let your students know what they are. In this case, I've added it to sort of a About Me page. Along with a little bit about what I see my facilitator role being. In this case, I'm saying that I will answer discussion forum questions within 24 to 48 hours, and then also encouraging the students to email if it's something a little bit more personal, and I'll respond within 24 hours. Now, I get this question a lot of what the proper amount of time is. And I really, being honest with you, I have looked these things up. The answer really has a lot to do with the overall timing of the course, maybe even you know, for instance, if it was that 8-week course, you know, you're going to want to make your response a little bit quicker. But you know what? Within that week, not over the weekend, whatever kind of communication expectations you pick, just know that, you know, let the students know about it and then commit to actually whatever you say is going to be your response time. So this is a little bit of a blur between that course design and course delivery, because you're going to, in the design phase, figure out how many hours your response time is going to be. But in the delivery, that's when you're going to actually make the commitment to your students to respond in a timely way. Another thing for communicating with your students is to consider using some kind of media. In this screenshot here, this is not a live video. It's just a screenshot of me from a course that I have done. It was actually our Design Academy here in Faculty Development. And I'm just doing a weekly introduction, and I'm using my webcam here on my PC to give a message to the students. In this case, I had the closed captioning on so that it was completely accessible, but in this case, it also allows you to see the message that I was giving to the students. Again, it's putting a face to me and communicating my weekly message to the student or my welcome to the course. So using media is a good idea. You can use avatars. There's different apps and other things that you can create avatars if you're not comfortable being filmed. But don't worry about it too much. I think another best practice is to really be comfortable and not try to be too overly perfect in these video introductions, because that just makes you more human and approachable. And you can also use your cell phone to do these introductions, so you don't need a webcam or sophisticated technology. It can be pretty simple to incorporate some media into that communication in your course. You can also encourage them to use media to communicate back with you. So if you ever want your students to do any kind of video or screencast or even an audio, like a podcast type of thing, that might be something that the students get a little creative with, and they may feel more comfortable just kind of almost talking to you by using media to communicate with you in the course. Retention Center. This is an interesting one. The Retention Center is not, its primary function is not to be used as a communication tool, but I'd like you just to consider it a little bit. If you're using the Retention Center in Blackboard, which is under evaluation in the course management area, you can look at students that are exhibiting at-risk behaviors in the course. There's an at-risk table in there, and those behaviors they're looking for is missed deadlines, grade alert, activity alert, and access alert. So that's definitely giving you some indicators on how they are faring in the course. But you can also use the notification button at the top to notify your students through the Retention Center instead of sending an email either through Blackboard or just through normal email channels. And the advantage to this is that it will create this notification history down at the bottom. So that is, in some ways, your indicator that you reached out to a student, and you can see at a certain time and date. But it's also kind of giving you this backup that you have notified the student, and maybe you're going to push it to the next level, or in the notification itself, maybe you're connecting with them and you just want to follow up with them to set up some a video conference or something like that, perhaps. So we've just been talking about communication, and we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about grading next. But I want to pause for a moment to see if anyone has any questions. You can add them to the text chat area. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. Okay, as I said before, anytime you want to add any questions into the text chat area, I'll be happy to answer them right away, or perhaps just find that natural break, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm glad everybody has no questions so far. Good to know. So grading, one of the first things that I would suggest is keeping your students and yourself on track. And one of the things to do about that is to, again, let your students know when you will be doing your grading and when they can expect feedback from you. Similar to this response time in any kind of communication, letting the students know and then committing to that feedback and grade. Couple good reasons for this. And I think the first one is if you let them know that, for instance, in my example here, that they can look for feedback and grades 3 days after the assignment due date, hopefully they will not be bugging you on days 1 and 2 about when they can expect their grades. You can get them done sooner, but you can kind of give yourself that time in 3 days, and again, hopefully they're not sort of bugging you about it. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you pick this feedback time. But one of the things I would say is that if you need during the semester to change your feedback time for any reason, for instance, if you are going to be going to a conference, or there's a big project coming up, let your students know as soon as possible that feedback time is going to be extended in some way. So here are some of the ways I would suggest that you sort of pace yourself in grading and feedback of the students' work. Pull out your calendar, and you probably have already sort of mapped out those due dates, and you're thinking about them in a couple ways. You might be thinking that I want everything due on Friday because I like to do my grading over the weekend. You may decide that you're going to make your due dates on Sunday evening because of maybe your students are in the workforce and you know that they are going to be getting their work done over the weekends, and you'd like to get your grading done the beginning of that following week. any of these questions that you're asking yourself is how you're going to sort of pace not only your due dates, but your grading workflow. If you know that there is a major assessment coming up that is going to take you a little bit longer to grade, build in that time for yourself, especially something like if you know you're going to have to grade several papers and there's going to be lots of reading and annotating on the assignments. Give yourself that time to do the grading properly. So again, pull out that calendar to do so. Some new benefits that came out again in May with our Blackboard upgrade. And I really like some of these new benefits that have come up. The first one is involved with the needs grading area. So if you've ever done an assignment and you've allowed your students to take multiple attempts of it, but you know that you're only going to grade the last attempt, then go ahead and try this out. When you go into the needs grading area in the grade center, if you use that workflow where you go to the grade center and then needs grading, you're going to see that you have less things that need grading. But if you would like to look at all of those multiple attempts, you can select the box that says show attempts that don't contribute to the user grade. If you remember how this worked before, you kind of had to go through all of those multiple attempts and just kind of click on them and click off of them until you got to that final grade, the one that you actually wanted to assign a grade to. So this new upgrade is really great. You're not going to have to go through all of those previous versions. But again, you can show them. You can look at them because maybe you do want to see progress or even how many times the students maybe attempted an assignment. So that if trust me, if you've seen this happen, you know exactly what I mean by this upgrade being really valuable. Next, there is a new upgrade feature when students submit assignments through the Blackboard assignments. What they're going to do is they're going to see a message at the top when they hit submit that says, success, your submission appears on this page. The submission number is, and there's a large number, and they can copy and save this number as proof of the submission. And so that will get around a little bit with the Blackboard 8 My Homework assignment. If students are nervous about their assignment was lost somehow, or they swear they submitted it and you're not seeing it, they will have this confirmation number available to them now. That might be something that you suggest they start copying maybe at the beginning of the semester and just sort of see how it goes. I know in my experience with teaching online, I usually give the student the benefit of the doubt the first time, but if I do allow them to submit an assignment a second time, I'm going to ask them to give me this confirmation number just so I know that everything, and they know that everything went through okay. Okay, now, best practice for sure in grading is to use the Blackboard interactive rubrics. There is, are we also provided with the number? You are, I think the number is provided sort of in the back end, but honestly, I will get back to you on that because initially I did not think the number was provided to the instructor, but we actually found this workaround the other day that those numbers might be really helpful if you're using delegated grading or anonymous grading for students, that that number that's generated almost becomes an anonymized way of looking at the student's assignment. So I will check that out. The students could generate a random number. You are absolutely right. So I am definitely going to ask those questions. We hadn't been asked those questions before, and I will provide you with the answer in my follow-up survey to everyone. Great question, Kenny. So Blackboard rubrics. They can be set up. We have an entire workshop on how to set them up, or if anybody has any questions on actually setting them up, just let me know. I'll be happy to go over after some other time, because again, we could spend an hour just going over how to set up interactive rubrics. But if you are familiar with them, they're great for giving your students good feedback, letting them know what your expectations are, but then also allowing you to provide your students with more personalized or specific feedback that they might need. It's already a little bit more specific because you can click on the boxes that are specific to a certain expectation that you're looking for, but the feedback box in the bottom allows you to just add some more comments to your students, for your students. I tend to use the more specific feedback when I am looking for improvement, but you can certainly use it for something like this case where the student has exceeded expectations. So my new upgrade feature, for the longest time, it looked like you could export rubrics out of a course and add that file back into a different course, but you always would get this error message. And the recommendation we would always make would be to just do a course copy and copy all of the rubrics into another course. The exporting rubric feature seems to be working now, so yay, we can finally use that. So just more encouragement to use rubrics. They are a bit of work to set up, but they pay off tenfold after you get them set up. Here's another grading best practice that goes along with that idea of giving that specific feedback to your students, is to save common feedback phrases that you know you use frequently. We were talking about that, maybe that long paper that you're going to need to read through and annotate. If you know that there's typical phrases that come up time and time again, start a bank of feedback phrases, and you can also put them into two different categories, positive and constructive. I just admitted that I am more likely to give feedback on a constructive specific measure, so I'd really like to have more of these positive feedback phrases. So again, I can tap into that student's motivation to really do their best work. So all of these phrases, I think I can kind of use interchangeably too. So for instance, if the positive one at the beginning here, great work on outlining the project, maybe I could change it to great work on finishing the assignment. But then you want to be a little bit more specific than great work. That's what we always give our students hassle over with discussion board posts. We want to see more than I agree or good idea. So let's get a little bit more detail and say I'm seeing improvement in identifying key concepts. So I've got that in my bank, but again, maybe I can just alter a little bit and say I'm seeing improvements in really expanding on critical ideas. You can just kind of really mix and match this vocabulary and just keep adding it to this feedback bank. So that has been my recommendations for grading strategies. So again, I'm just going to pause for a minute to see if there's any questions out there. I'm also curious if anyone has come across that issue I was talking about where you had multiple assignments and you had all that grading to clean up. Okay, good. Okay, so what are some best practices to supporting our students? And the first one is to conduct a pre-survey. It's sort of starting at the beginning. So if there's anything that you think would be useful to support your students using a pre-survey, uh, go ahead and do that. Maybe it's the prerequisite knowledge. Maybe you're asking the students what their goals are for the course. Um, Anything like that is going to have kind of focused them in on how they're starting off the course. Maybe you're asking them in the pre-survey if they have any specific questions that they are hoping are going to be addressed in this course. Conducting a pre-survey is definitely a way to have them engage in their own learning, but also to help you understand where they're at and where they need to go from there. Another best practice for supporting your students is to host a virtual office hour. You can use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra like we're using for this workshop this afternoon. Ultra is in all of your Blackboard courses. This could be used for a study session. This could be used for an introduction to the beginning of the semester, or maybe even the beginning of a more difficult assignment. I have a major project due at the end of my course. I break it down into the final 3 weeks, so that's part of my time management so that I don't have a lot of grading to do at the end. But one of the things is I host a virtual office hour just to go over all of the details with the students, sort of at that major what's happening over the next 3 weeks level, but also go into some details about what I expect to happen in each of those final 3 weeks. I don't plan a lot of content. It's really just a lot of questions and answers and pointing stuff out. Another best practice to support your students is to provide them with a frequently asked question area or that question and answer discussion area. You can do this in a couple ways. The question and answer could be just for technical questions. Maybe they found a link that didn't work, like the link that I sent everyone out this morning. It could be on content. So maybe they have a specific difficult concept that they're trying to get through. If you notice that you're getting questions over maybe a few semesters, first I would challenge you to maybe address those in the content or address that in the design if it's kind of a navigation question, or create these frequently asked questions if you know it's something that's typically going to come up. And that's your choice. Sometimes you can put those frequently asked questions up for your students ahead of time, maybe as supplemental material, or maybe you do want the students to kind of struggle with the content a little bit, deepen their thinking, and then provide them with some of these answers to questions that come up often. Another strategy is to use a technique that I used to use a lot in professional development with teachers, and that's to create a Muddiest Point discussion area, or maybe even allow the students to share with you in their reflection journal what their muddiest point is. So what are they really struggling with? And again, a couple different ways you can do that. Is it specific to the content that you're delivering in the course that week? Or do you want the students to share with you more of a muddiest point of how they're managing, um, their overall workload, or even how they might wonder how they're going to use this skill or this content in their professional life. Again, supporting them all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning, that idea that this is going to connect with their future professional life some way. So any of those strategies that you've used with your students in courses, you might be able to translate that into your online course. Another one besides Muddiest Point would be like an exit card where you would have the students maybe write down on an index card and pass in at the end of class what they found the most interesting and what they wanted to know more about. I just described that as an index card handed in at the end of the week, but maybe it's a discussion board, maybe it's a blog, maybe it's even some kind of poll that you created. Whatever you want to do to kind of translate some of those activities that you know really supported your student in a face-to-face course. See if we can come up with a way to help them with that in your online course. So here's another tip for supporting your students, and it's a really easy one, but I think it's so important, and that's to remember NIU support units and refer your students to them. There are so many different support units here at the university. The library has so many online resources. The Writing Center actually does sort of virtual tutoring now, and they've been adding more and more online. All of these support units have been really increasing their support for online students. So let your students know how to get a hold of those support units. Again, you can give them some of that information up in front of the course. I would recommend that, but also in that teaching, in that delivering time of during your course, you notice a student could really benefit from some tutoring from the Writing Center. Reach out to them and let them know that they have that support available to them, that they do not need to struggle. Finally, these best practices at the end were best practices that we just sort of came up with and couldn't decide where we were going to put them. So we're just kind of throwing them here at the end. So the first one is to remember to use your student preview mode. That has been in our instance of Blackboard for a couple of years now, but I still think it might be a secret to some. At the top, slightly right-hand side of your Blackboard page, near the Edit Mode button, there is what I think of, it looks like an eyeball or maybe a recycle symbol. That is your student preview mode. You can go into student preview mode and it would have that look that a student would have. So if you've ever wondered if something was hidden or how it actually looks when students submit their work, any of that sort of thing you can do in the student preview mode. So not only can you see what it's like, but you can actually submit the work, pull yourself out of the student preview mode and keep the data, and then go ahead and grade your work. So before the semester starts or before that first major paper is due, if you like to try it out ahead of time and practice that grading workflow, use your student preview mode. The next piece of advice, reverse order structures. What that means is that you are going to move your folders or any of your content so that the most recent item, assessment, blog post appears at the top of the page. And so when we design it, we're actually sort of doing the first week and that shows up on top, and then we do the second week and that shows up below, and everything keeps coming up at the bottom. So what I'm suggesting is that you actually reverse that order so that students will see the most current work at the top. Remember to set availability dates. There's availability dates all over the place in Blackboard, and that will allow you to sort of open and close different things in Blackboard. Most of the time I see folks will make it become available to students and then kind of just leave it open, but if you wanted to provide your students with a study guide and then you wanted it to be unavailable during the actual test, you could use that until date restriction. Also, use your due dates. They will be added to the student's calendar, and it will let them know when due dates are coming up, and it'll also let you know if students submit work late using those due dates. Next tip, enable grading for discussion forums. This seems like an obvious one if you are grading discussion forums, but it is a button that you need to click to enable grading and then adding the possible points. It just makes the grading of discussion forums much easier. So take a second when you're setting up your discussion forums. If you are using them as a graded assessment, check that box to enable grading. My last best practice is to model the behaviors you want from your students. And modeling the behaviors, I think, is one of the biggest parts of the delivering or the teaching of the course. So if you expect your students to write discussion board posts using professional language, whatever profession you are kind of tapping into, model those behaviors in your announcements, model them in your responses to discussions, any way that you can kind of show that. Maybe it's even in the pictures that you choose. I tend to be a little more informal when I post pictures, but if I'm talking about something that I learned at a conference, then I might post a picture of myself in a business suit presenting at a conference. Anything, again, that you can kind of show your students that you understand that if they are to be professional or if they need to cite papers properly, you're going to have these same behaviors and you're going to model them appropriately for them. So we've got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to just kind of summarize things here. And it's a summary of what we talked about back at the beginning. But here's my best advice here. Regarding communicating with your students, communicate with them often. That's my biggest piece of advice right there. For grading students' work, remember to use your tools. Use those rubrics. You're welcome, Marcia. Use those rubrics. Use anything else that is available to you. The inline grading tool is another great one to use for grading. Remember to support your online students. Use your resources that are here at the university or any other support that you find. And then manage your workload. Remember to take care of yourself. And again, my name is Tracy Miller, and you're welcome, everyone. I can see everyone kind of signing off here. I did add a link into the text chat area if anyone's interested in taking the survey right now, but I will send it out in my follow-up email. I will send out the answers to the question about the confirmation number, the recording, and the survey. I do multiple attempts, but I tell the students I will grade the last attempt. Thanks for the tips. Great. I think you'll see it much more streamlined with the new